Hi everyone, welcome back to Broomy's Garage. Today we're going to talk about going on a diet. Thanks for clicking on the video, click subscribe, like all that stuff if you like the content, you want to see more. Now first of all, got to talk about something pretty heavy here, and it's time to go on a diet. No, not me, this car here. So this thing with me in it weighs basically about 2,600 pounds. That is, I don't know in kilograms. There's something still in the world where the imperial system is still used. Drag racing is definitely one of them when you're talking about weights of cars. Even time, mile an hour. You could tell me how much, I know this car's run 160 mile an hour. Could not tell you what that is in kilometers an hour. So still a few things that are in the old USA language when it comes to it, and car weights in drag racing is definitely one of them. So 2,600 pounds is actually super heavy. Now, when you look at, I guess, everything in life, sort of, not just car racing, but you look at horse racing, the jockeys, you look at marathon running, you look at those marathon runners, what do those kind of people have in common? Even you look at Formula One races, what do those guys have in common? They are about this big. Yeah, they're tiny, and that is because the less mass you have to move, the easier it is to move it. So this is a big, heavy car. Now, it's not heavy in terms of some other cars out there. Like, you know, if you were racing in somewhere like a late model Commodore and that, they're probably 3,500 plus pound cars. So they're super heavy. But the difference is, I don't have a twin turbo LS1 to help me out. I don't have a huge 3 litre 2JZ under the bonnet. You know, I don't have a 4 litre Barra. I've got a little tiny 2-rotor engine, and I can only do what I can do with that engine. Now, sure, granted, the best of the best guys out there in drag racing with these engines are probably making, I don't know, maybe they're making 1,500 horsepower or something, 1,600 horsepower now. You know, sure, whatever, that's super power, but you know, twin turbo LS guys are probably making 2,500 horsepower or something plus. The 2J guys are making 2,000 horsepower plus. So realistically for me, my horsepower max sort of limit really in terms of budget sort of engine setup is maybe like 1,000 horsepower. So the 1,000 horsepower, the only way I'm going to actually go faster is to put this thing on a diet. So let's have a look over the car and let's see what ways we can possibly save some weight here. All right, so if we look over the car and every sort of area of where we can possibly take weight out of it, we have the engine bay right here, and as you can see, this is pretty standard FD engine bay. Now, obviously, here's all the components that have to go back in here, but I've got the engine there. I do have a billet front plate, so that saves some weight, so that's great. I've got a giant turbo, but we only have the single turbo. Factory twins are actually right there. But yeah, we've got all that. What we don't have is power steering pump, air conditioning pump, that kind of stuff. So that's pretty much about as much weight as we can save in the engine bay. Now I could cut all of this structure out of here, the rails and everything like that, and just have a tube, like a chassis sort of setup, but then that would actually make this car not legal for a lot of stuff. So most important thing this car is that it's still outwardly appears to be a, you know, looking like a sort of like a standard FD, and also it has to fit in basic sort of class rules. So it can't just have, you know, twin rail, chassis rail sort of thing, because it's not a 6-second car. It's just sort of a small tire sort of street looking car. So chopping the thing up and just adding roll cage tubing instead isn't an option. So engine bay pretty much done. So let's move into the center cabin. Right, so here are my doors. They are fairly heavy. They've still got the power windows in it. They've got the full glass, and they've also got the power window mechanism, and they've still got the center crush bracing and everything. And so these doors are actually super heavy. You can feel them in there when you open them. All this stuff here is really heavy. It's all multiple thick wall and that too. So I think in terms of saving weight, this is definitely somewhere we can do it. In terms of in here, I mean, Again, you're not going to start cutting out the entire floor in that because it's just a standard sort of street car. So, well, not a street car, street appearing sort of car. It's based on, it's just all factory chassis, I should say. So I think this could be one of the areas we go to. With that being said, let's go to the back of the car and see if there's anything else we can do. Right, so last thing is the hatch. Now this hatch is super, super heavy. I haven't taken it off the hinges to weigh it, but man, this thing takes a lot of work to lift up. So I think the hatch is something maybe in fiberglass. Carbon fiber is probably like a couple of $1,000. Fiberglass is going to be significantly cheaper. Tony, I want that fiberglass hatch. So I know someone with one. It's got to sort it out and arrange it for me. So I think I'm going to do a fiberglass hatch here and put that in. And then, yeah, and then something else I think we'll arrange, which we'll talk about now. So I think those are probably the two things we'll do. I'll cut some weight out of the doors and I'll get a fiberglass hatch. But the next part about that also that I can do is this glass is pretty thick and heavy as well. So Lexan, which is essentially plastic perspex, is probably the half of whatever the weight of actual glass is. So I think what I'm looking to do is probably go Lexan in the door windows, Lexan on the hatch, and I might leave glass on the front screen because I just like the glass front screen. Also don't want to put, you know, the strengthening steel plate down the middle of the window on that. I might just leave that glass window in there because I'm not sure, that might be like saving £5 or something, and it's probably not overly worth it. But I may have already done some hack, chop, so let's take a bit of a closer look at what I have done so far. So here is my door. As you can see, still got the door mechanism on there. Still closes with a thud. Still all normal steel door, but if you look in here, there ain't nothing in there. So this still opens and shuts from here. I'll probably take the lock mechanism off it because that doesn't need to be there anymore, but it still shuts completely fine, shuts with a slam. So what I need to do is just make Lexan window, which will be pretty easy because it's a pretty standard window. And what'll happen is it'll actually, you'll just sort of riv nut or even rivet it just here. So it'll come up on the frame. I'll rivet it all here and then screw it into the inside lip in here. And that'll be it. Now, in terms of the weight taken out of it, here is what's basically missing from that door now. So here it is. This is, that's the reinforcement crash bar. That's the inner door skin. This is the glass and the power window mechanism. And I know the first thing you're gonna say is probably not, oh, how much weight did you save? It's gonna be, cut up an FD, it's an icon of the world, how could you do that? Well, guess what, it's my FD, I'll cut whatever I want out of it. You want to not cut your FD, go buy your own one. But basically it means now I've pretty much saved about 40 pounds of weight. So taking 40 pounds of weight out of the car, which is not insignificant. So what I'm hoping now is that the rear hatch, I believe, is about, the rear hatch and glass all up is about 75 pounds. Now, I think the Lexan will be about 10 pounds to replace that glass. And if I can get a fiberglass hatch, which weighs, say, 20 pounds, you know, it's going to be another 35 order of a pound saving. So it's going to be basically around 75 pounds weight saving by doing just the doors and the hatch. Now, if that means, I think the car weighs something like 2580. So if that means I can get down to 2,500 pounds just from doing those couple little things, that's great. Because literally 100 pounds is worth at least a tenth. At least a tenth. So, you know, last time when we ran the 8.7, you know, it was, you know, we were making probably around 800 horsepower at the wheels, 2,600 pound car. We ran 8.7, 161 mile an hour. We did it on a 148 60 foot. Now we know we've already been 127 60 foot. So 148 to 127 is 2 tenths in the 60 foot different. That is basically 4 tenths. Anyone that knows drag racing, that's 4 tenths at the end ET. So if you take the 870 and take 4 tenths off it, that's 8.3. Take another tenth off for the you you know, for the steel I just took out of this thing, and suddenly we're at 8.2. You know, so this is basically as it sits now with the weight of the car and just the power that we already had it on, like just 35 pound, the car's already capable of running 8.2. Now, I ain't gonna just run 35 pound when the car comes back out. So let's have a bit of a quick chat about not just weight savings, obviously, but what I've got planned for the dyno coming up shortly. All right, so as you would know, if you've seen any of the last 2 videos, I think, you'll know that I'm going back to the dyno as soon as I get my engine back. So just waiting for plates to be lapped, machined, whatever, coated and that. And then new front housing, and we're going to put it all together, slap it all back in. But then I'm going to the dyno. Now I'm going to test a fair few things on the dyno, and the main ones is I want to test obviously the engine as is, get the tune up right on about 40 psi. Hopefully we'll make somewhere around 850 horsepower at the wheels or more. Then once we do that, I'm going to test a couple of things. I'm going to test timing split. So I'm going to have timing as, say, 10 degrees split flat. Then I'm actually going to run less split as the RPM raises. I'm going to run more split as the RPM raises, see if there's actually any power difference or EGT difference or anything, how it runs. Other things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to disconnect the trailing coils altogether and see how much power that robs, so to speak. And then the last major thing I'm going to test is I'm going to obviously have it, this is non-intercooled, so I'm going to run it non-intercooled. Then I'm going to run a test with it just with my nitrous fogger nozzle. So here you can see the nitrous outlet wet system fogger nozzle. One is for fuel, one is for nitrous, and that's how I run it on the trans brake. But something I started thinking about a while back was if the bottle's already in the car and nitrous oxide is something like 100 and, I think it's about 100 degrees Celsius, negative 100 degrees Celsius or thereabouts, that if I was to inject a 35 horsepower shot in the system, what benefit could that have to the intake air temp charge and also horsepower overall? So yes, it's a 35 horsepower shot of nitrous, so you'd expect around about 35 horsepower power gain, but if it's able to really cool the intake air temp charge, then the power gain might not be 35 horsepower, it might be 60 horsepower or something like that. So what I want to do is I want to run just the fuel, so actually spraying methanol upstream of the system just after the turbo to try and take some temp out of the intake air, see how much power that makes over just having straight no intercooler, no nothing, just the injectors in the manifold. Then turn on nitrous, so you're going to have fuel and nitrous upstream, cooling all that air before it gets to the intake manifold, and seeing what benefits that has on intake air temp and horsepower as well, and just seeing what it does. Now, interesting thing was that after I was thinking about this, a couple of people have reached out and said they're actually doing it. So a couple of fast guys in Australia are actually doing this stuff, and I know obviously there's some pretty decently powerful guys over in the US that have nitrous on their car with no intercooling as well. Now, I always sort of just didn't even think about it, the fact that the nitrous could cool the intake temp charge, but you know, it's probably obviously one of the massive benefits to this. So now by the time nitrous is injected, say, into the stream, it's basically already a gas. It's stored under pressure in the bottle, but by the time it basically makes it into the stream, it's already a gas. So a cold gas in a gas state's probably not going to take as much heat out of the air as you maybe expect, but I've got a lot of EGT probes available on my, because I've got an 8 EGT block basically, and there's only 2 being taken up. So I'm going to put an EGT probe in right at the intake port basically. So just on the intake runner of the manifold. I'm going to put one just prior to the throttle body, and then I'm going to put one right after the turbo, so I can just log, just for interest sake, just for you guys, a video and just dyno stuff to see exactly how much the temperature change is by doing all these 3 things that I want to do. And then we'll go from there. So I'm pretty confident that whatever issues it had before, that we'll be able to sort through them. And, you know, like I said, essentially, you know, with a decent 60 foot and some weight taken out of the car, we've already theoretically run somewhere in the 820s. You know, we've already made enough power to have the car go an 820. We just need to get that the car not to behave now, but we just need to get that short track to line up with the one short track we did last time with how the car ran that other time when it ran the 870. And we've got an 8.2 without changing anything. So in terms of more weight saving, I'm not really sure I can take more weight out of this car. The frame rails are so thick on this car because, you know, it's a real stiff monocoque chassis design. The rear rails are probably somewhere where I could maybe drill some holes, some strategic holes to pull some more weight out of the car, take some other brackets off the car. So maybe doing some of that, we might be able to save another 30 or something pounds, but I don't know how much more weight I can really take out of this car post what we've already taken out with some of the stuff there. I mean, you know, there's no use for a bonnet. These are aluminium. They're super, super light. So, you know, going to even a carbon one of this isn't going to save any weight at all, really. Same with like the front guards and stuff like that. So I think cut some weight out of doors, get that hatch sorted, get some weight down, and then, you know, post that, if you really want to chase it, it's probably things like I've got Jeg Spikes front wheels here and they are heavy. They're a heavy front wheel, and unsprung mass really hurts it to accelerate the car too. So there's stuff like that. I'm going to take the brake booster off. Don't know what else I can do, but maybe we can get around to doing a few things. One thing I am going to do also that I haven't done before is trying to feed cold air directly to the turbo. So how everything was set up before because of my giant water neck, I'll show you that. Oh, so here's some more weight that I just forgot about we're taking off. This alternator and all this water neck setup. So getting rid of that's going to definitely save some weight, but I could never run a direct feed sort of setup before because of how this was routed. So moving some of the stuff out of the way, I just want to feed like, even if it's only like a 2-inch diameter pipe, just something to directly feed from the frontal area of this car, directly feed absolute cold air to that turbo and force some of that air in is going to help air intake temps as well. So right now it's like sucking, you know, 80°C sort of air from the engine bay. And I think if we can directly feed air that's 20 degrees, so that's a massive change in what it's ingesting before it starts getting compressing and adding all that heat too. So that's another change I'll make. Other than that, I think we're pretty much ready to go. So once parts are all back, slap the engine together, slap it in, and yeah, get to the dyno as soon as we can because it's been down for a while now. Realistically, I think I raced once at September last year and once in like April, March this year. So I've only really raced twice in almost 12 months now. So keen to get back out there because realistically, I want to put this thing to bed and get back to work on the RX-4. So that's pretty much where we're at the moment. If you've got any data or actual real world testing in terms of nitrous as an intercooler with no intercooler in your car, hey, hit me up. If you've got a data log and you want to send it through. But thanks for watching for now. Till next time, I'll see you then.